Hello, and welcome to the next in our series of videos on IFRS9 for corporates. I'm Sandra Thompson. I lead our global accounting technical group for financial instruments. I'm here today with Claire Howells. Claire works in our UK technical team, working with our clients there as they implement IFRS9. Today we're going to carry on talking about hedge accounting, and we're going to cover one of the most common types of hedges that corporates have, and that's hedges of borrowings or debt. Now, many companies take out interest rate swaps to swap fixed rate debt into floating, or indeed floating rate debt into fixed. And some companies also issue debt in foreign currency and then swap it back to their domestic currency, perhaps because the all-in cost of doing that is cheaper than taking domestic currency debt outright. Now, those kinds of hedge relationships can get hedge accounting today, and they carry on getting hedge accounting under IFRS9. Indeed, many companies will want to apply hedge accounting because if you don't, the profit and loss account can be quite volatile. Debt's often long-term, so the impact can be big. But there are some changes under IFRS9. Claire, can you tell us a bit about some of those?
So one of the big changes is the fact that IFRS9 now allows hedges of aggregated exposures. What do I mean by that? Well, as you mentioned, sometimes a company will take out debt in a foreign currency and then swap it back into its domestic currency. Now, it could hedge the foreign currency risk, it could hedge the interest rate risk, it could hedge both. Often they might just choose to hedge foreign currency to start with. They're not worried about interest rates. But then strategies change. So perhaps 2 or 3 years down the line, they want to hedge the interest rate risk. Under IAS 39, you had to stop the first hedge and then start again redesignating. You may well have non-zero fair value derivatives and all the complications that causes for effectiveness testing. Under IFRS 9, you could actually use the original hedge as hedge 1 and then add on top of that the new interest rate hedge, hedging that aggregated exposure of debt plus a swap, which wouldn't have been permitted under IAS 39.
And that gives you less P&L volatility?
That will give you less P&L volatility because you'll have less ineffectiveness.
And another benefit of those aggregated exposure rules is it enables you to hedge a forecast debt issuance when you don't know what currency the debt will be issued in. So it's quite common for corporates to say, for example, I know I will want to issue debt in 3 years' time. And when I get to that point in 3 years, I'll assess market conditions and I'll do it the cheapest way I can. So I might issue in a foreign currency and swap back to my domestic currency, or I might issue direct in the domestic currency, whichever is the cheaper. Now, under IAS 39, you couldn't get hedge accounting for that kind of strategy. But under IFRS 9, by using the aggregated exposures, you can, because you'll aggregate the debt in a foreign currency with the foreign currency swap. That becomes your hedged item, and then you'll layer on any other derivatives on top of that. So that gives you a flavour of some of the flexibility that IFRS 9 now allows. Claire, I'm aware that companies often change their hedging strategies. You mentioned that. Is there any more flexibility there?
There's flexibility and there's a lack of flexibility. There was a concern that IFRS 9 says you cannot de-designate hedges. Actually, what it says is you can't de-designate if the risk management objective is still the same. So there's a difference between the risk management objective, which might be at the very finite level of a particular hedge on a particular debt, versus the risk management strategy, which is an overall board level, this is how I am managing risk across my company or across my group.
Claire, that sounds quite a fine line between a risk management objective and a risk management strategy. Can you give us an example?
Of course. So for example, the documented strategy might be to fix between 40 and 60% of your debt. Now, while interest rates are lower, the company might choose to unfix some of its previously fixed debt. So perhaps they were at 60% fixed. They're now going to say, I'm going to release 20% of that because I think interest rates will stay low for another couple of years, by which point I'll be refinancing anyway. Now, arguably you can't do that because that's de-designating, but I'm still within my 40 to 60%. I'm only de-designating 20%. I will still be within my risk management strategy, but for that particular piece of debt, I no longer want to fix it, so my hedging objective has changed.
So you could do that and still get hedge accounting?
And you can still do that and continue to hedge account for the other hedges within your area. You also, the fact that you de-designated doesn't mean you need to release any liability, for example, on the derivative. So there's no P&L impact from dedesignating so long as the hedged item continues to exist.
Now, Claire, I noticed that you used the term hedged item. I suspect there might have been a reason for that.
You're quite right. So IFRS 9 is a really good opportunity for you to revisit your documentation. You've got to update it anyway for sources of ineffectiveness and how you're going to demonstrate that you meet the hedge criteria. But also we want to make sure that that hedged item is specific enough to meet the requirements of hedging, but not so specific that it causes you a problem. So, for example, say I have 10-year hedging instrument. I have debt that's 10 years to start with, but actually I choose to refinance it partway through the life. Now, if I'm really, really specific, I may fail hedge accounting because I no longer have that original debt. But if I've refinanced, perhaps with the same bank, I've still got the same hedged item, I've still got the same hedged risk, the interest rate risk. So providing I document carefully, I can actually have a rollover strategy for my hedged item, my debt, and potentially for my derivative as well.
And that means you can carry on hedge accounting with the same hedge?
Continue hedge accounting with the same hedge and don't have to go back and start again with a derivative that's already in place, non-zero fair values, all those complications. We can continue hedge accounting.
So just to recap, we've talked today about hedging debt, one of the most common hedges that corporates do. We've talked about some of the additional flexibility you have in IFRS 9 to hedge aggregated exposures or to hedge a forecast debt issuance when you don't know the currency. And we've talked about how you could very carefully document your hedges to, as Claire said, future-proof them and avoid issues in the future. That's it for today. I do hope you'll join us next time. Bye-bye.